From the outside, Daniel and I looked like the picture-perfect couple. Friends, coworkers, even random strangers used to tell us how lucky we were to have found each other. He was charming, ambitious, and always knew how to make people laugh. I was the organized one, the planner, the one who kept our lives moving forward. Together we seemed unstoppable. We had been dating for almost 4 years when he proposed. It happened during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. We were sipping wine at sunset when he suddenly dropped to one knee. Everyone around us clapped, and I remember crying so hard I could barely say yes. At that moment I believed every dream I ever had about love was finally coming true. The engagement was a whirlwind. My mom cried tears of joy, his parents threw a huge dinner party, and my friends immediately launched into maid of honor mode, sending me Pinterest boards full of wedding decor. It felt like we were stepping into a fairy tale, one we had written together. Daniel seemed every bit the devoted fiancé. He texted me good morning, brought me flowers randomly, and even took an interest in wedding planning. He'd talk about venues, sample cakes, and flip through bridal magazines with me, pointing out tuxedos he thought looked sharp. I used to tell my friends, "Can you believe he's this involved? Most guys don't care." They'd all sigh and call me lucky. We settled on a gorgeous venue just outside the city, an old estate with sprawling gardens and a ballroom dripping with chandeliers. It cost more than I ever imagined spending, but Daniel insisted we deserved a perfect wedding. He told me, "It's once in a lifetime, Emily. Let's make it unforgettable." Looking back, that phrase, "let's make it unforgettable," took on a whole new meaning. But at the time I smiled and kissed him, convinced I was marrying the love of my life. The months leading up to the wedding were a blur of planning. Dress fittings, floral arrangements, cake tastings, seating charts. It was stressful but exciting. Daniel had a busy job in finance, but he always made time to check in on how things were going. Or at least that's what I thought. There were little moments here and there that should have given me pause. Like the nights he came home late, claiming he was stuck at the office with a big client. Or the weekends when he suddenly had to work on last-minute projects. I wanted to believe him. After all, we were building a life together, and trust was supposed to be the foundation. I brushed off the doubts, telling myself, "He's just stressed. The wedding planning and work pressure must be a lot." Our families adored him. My dad used to say Daniel was the kind of man he hoped his daughter would marry. Stable, hardworking, respectable. My mom called him the son she never had. His charm was effortless and people couldn't help but like him. He'd flash that smile, pour on the charisma, and suddenly even the strictest relative melted. But behind that polished exterior, cracks were starting to show. I didn't notice them right away, but in hindsight they were there. One night, while sitting on the couch together, I noticed his phone buzzing nonstop. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening before quickly flipping it face down. When I asked who it was, he muttered something about work drama and changed the subject. Another time, while shopping for tuxedos, he stepped outside to take a call. I watched him through the store window. His back was turned, but his body language seemed different. He wasn't tense like he usually was during work calls. He was relaxed, almost playful. Still, I ignored the signs. Love makes you blind, they say, and I was completely blinded by my belief that this man was my forever. The countdown to the wedding was ticking fast. Invitations were sent, RSVPs rolled in, and final payments were due. Every dollar spent felt like an investment into a future we were about to share. I imagined walking down the aisle, seeing his face light up, and starting our new life as husband and wife. Daniel played his part perfectly. He complimented me during dress fittings, joked about how expensive centerpieces were, and practiced our first dance with surprising enthusiasm. He even teared up during our rehearsal dinner when he gave a toast, saying he couldn't wait to marry the love of his life. Everyone believed him, and so did I. If anyone had told me then that the man I was about to marry was living a double life, I would have laughed in their face. If they had whispered that he wasn't just lying, but preparing to betray me in the most humiliating way possible, I would have called them cruel. Because at that moment I was still living in the dream. The calm before the storm. The stage before the curtain fell, revealing the ugliest truth I never saw coming. And that's where my story begins. The illusion of perfection, the trust one thought was unshakable, and the love I thought would last forever. Little did I know, the wedding I was pouring my soul into would become the very stage for my revenge. In the months leading up to the wedding, the fairy tale started to crack in subtle ways. At first, I brushed it off as stress. After all, planning a wedding is overwhelming, but slowly the red flags piled up until they were impossible to ignore. Daniel's work hours grew longer and less predictable. He claimed big deals were on the line, clients demanded late-night calls, and his boss leaned on him heavily. I wanted to believe him. After all, his job in finance had always been demanding, but now it seemed to consume him entirely. Some nights he wouldn't get home until midnight. I'd be curled up on the couch, half asleep, waiting for him, and he'd stumble in with a tired smile, apologizing for being late. He'd kiss my forehead and mumble about how everything he was doing was for us. The first real pang of doubt hit me one Saturday morning. I was at the farmer's market, and I spotted Daniel across the street. He was walking quickly, looking around nervously. But he wasn't alone. He was with a woman, a brunette in a sleek dress, heels clicking against the pavement. They looked comfortable. Too comfortable. He leaned down, said something in her ear, and she laughed, brushing her hand against his arm. Before I could even process it, Daniel's phone rang. He stepped aside, answered, and the woman disappeared into a cafe. Seconds later, he spotted me across the street. For a split second, his face froze. Then, in true Daniel fashion, he waved, jogged over, and kissed me as if nothing had happened. "Oh, hey babe. What are you doing here?" he asked too casually. My voice shook as I replied, "I could ask you the same thing." He barely missed a beat. "Oh, just meeting a client. She's inside. Big account. Didn't want to bore you with work stuff." He smiled so smoothly, so confidently that I almost believed him. Almost. But the seed of doubt was planted that day, and it never left me. From then on, I started noticing little things. The way he guarded his phone like it was made of gold. The way he'd tilt the screen away when I walked by. The sudden new cologne he claimed a coworker recommended. The gym bag left in his car, though he never seemed sweatier or fitter than before. Then there were the expenses. I handled most of our joint finances, so I noticed the irregularities first. Charges at expensive restaurants I'd never been to, hotel bills in the city where we both lived, and mysterious purchases at jewelry stores. When I asked, Daniel always had an answer. The restaurant? Client dinner. The hotel? Late-night work function, didn't want to drive back tired. The jewelry? A surprise for you. Don't ruin it. His excuses were neat, tidy, almost rehearsed. And every time I confronted him, he'd disarm me with charm. He'd pull me close, kiss me, whisper promises of forever. I wanted so badly to believe him that I shoved my doubts into the darkest corners of my mind. But the universe has a way of ripping away blinders. One evening while Daniel showered, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally I never snooped. Trust was sacred to me. But that night something inside me snapped. My hand shook as I picked up the phone, hesitating only a second before unlocking it with the code I'd known for years. The messages hit me like a punch to the gut. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. You look so sexy in that dress. Counting down the days until you're mine for real. There were dozens of them. All from the same number. All from the woman I'd seen at the farmer's market. And sprinkled between her texts were his replies. Flirty, romantic, and damning. My stomach churned as I scrolled further. There were pictures too, selfies of her in lingerie, snapshots of their dinners together, hotel rooms I recognized from the credit card statements. Each one was another nail in the coffin of the life I thought I had. I remember dropping the phone as if it had burned me. The sound echoed in the quiet bedroom. Daniel emerged from the bathroom moments later, towel around his waist, humming to himself. He saw the phone on the floor, then looked at me, frozen, pale, and shaking. "Emily? What's wrong?" he asked, his voice dripping with fake concern. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone at him, demand answers, cry until my throat was raw. But something inside me stopped. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was rage hardening into something sharper. Either way, I didn't give him the fight he expected. Instead, I took a deep breath, forced my face into neutrality and said, "Nothing. Just tired. Wedding stress." His eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second, but then he smiled, kissed my cheek, and went back to pretending everything was normal. That night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, listening to his even breathing. The man I thought I was going to marry was lying to my face, sleeping soundly, while I carried the weight of his betrayal. But here's the thing Daniel never knew about me. I don't explode. I don't break down. I don't give cheaters the satisfaction of seeing me shatter. No, I plot. And in that sleepless night I decided, if Daniel wanted to play games, then fine. I'd play better. I wouldn't just expose him. I'd do it in a way he'd never forget. The wedding we'd spent months planning. The event he wanted to be unforgettable. That would be the stage for his downfall. I smiled to myself in the dark, already imagining the look on his face when his carefully constructed world collapsed around him. If he thought he was clever, he had no idea who he was really dealing with. Once the truth was out in front of me, the texts, the photos, the receipts, I knew I couldn't go back to being the naive fiancé who believed in Daniel's lies. But I also knew that exploding in rage would only give him control of the story. He'd twist it, manipulate it, maybe even convince people I was paranoid or insecure. So instead of confronting him, I made a decision. I'd play dumb. I'd act like nothing was wrong, like I hadn't seen the messages that burned in my memory every time I looked at him. And while he thought I was still his perfect, unsuspecting bride-to-be, I'd quietly gather everything I needed to destroy him. The first step was financial. I logged into our joint account late one night, while Daniel snored beside me. My heart pounded as I scrolled through transactions I'd skimmed over before. Now I looked at them with fresh eyes. There it was, hundreds of dollars at upscale restaurants I'd never stepped foot in. Hotel bills for conference stays that didn't line up with his supposed business trips. Jewelry purchases that never made their way into my jewelry box. One transaction stood out. $1,200 at a boutique lingerie store. The date was a week before Valentine's Day. That Valentine's, Daniel had given me flowers and a bottle of wine. No lingerie. No $1,200 gift. My stomach twisted, but instead of crying I opened a spreadsheet. If he wanted to waste our money on his mistress, I was going to track every single dollar. Line by line, transaction by transaction, I built a case against him. By the time I was done, the total was staggering. Over $15,000 siphoned out of our joint savings in the past 6 months alone. The next step was proof. Screenshots of his texts. Copies of bank statements. Photos of receipts I found stuffed in his jacket pocket. I emailed them all to myself, then backed them up on a hidden USB drive. If Daniel ever suspected me, I wasn't going to risk losing everything I'd collected. But I wasn't finished. I needed undeniable, in-your-face proof that would silence any excuses he might come up with. That's when I reached out to a private investigator. First, I hesitated. Hiring a PI felt like something people did in movies, not real life. But after one phone call, I realized it was exactly what I needed. I explained the situation, left out the wedding part, and the PI agreed to tail Daniel for a week. The results came back faster than I expected. Photos of Daniel kissing the brunette outside a hotel. Pictures of him holding her hand at restaurants. One particularly nauseating shot of him buying her a necklace while she leaned on his shoulder, grinning like she'd won the lottery. When the PI handed me the folder, I felt equal parts sick and vindicated. There it was, the truth in black and white, undeniable and ugly. Daniel wasn't just cheating. He was building an entire secret life, one he funded with our money. Still, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I smiled when he kissed me, laughed at his stupid jokes, and pretended to obsess over floral arrangements while inside. My rage burned hotter than ever. Every time he lied to my face, I nodded sweetly and told him how much I loved him. Every time he claimed he was working late, I bit back the urge to scream and instead made a note in my growing collection of evidence. Because I wasn't planning a wedding anymore. I was planning revenge. The opportunity came one night when Daniel left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. He was in the shower and curiosity tugged at me like a magnet. I told myself not to, that I already had enough proof, but something made me look. His email inbox was a goldmine. Messages from the brunette, her name was Rachel by the way, gushed about their future together. She mentioned trips they were planning, whispered about how she couldn't wait for him to finally tell Emily the truth. One email in particular made my blood boil. Rachel had sent him a link to a villa in Mexico, asking if he thought it would be perfect for their honeymoon. Their honeymoon. The same man who was about to stand across from me at the altar was simultaneously planning a fake future with someone else. And then I realized the cruelest part. He wasn't going to leave me before the wedding. No, he was going to marry me, enjoy the gifts, the money, the support of our families, and then slowly transition into this new life with Rachel, making me look like the discarded fool. That was when I decided the wedding wasn't going to be canceled. Oh no, it was going to happen exactly as planned. The flowers, the cake, the venue, the guests, every detail would stay intact. Because this wedding wasn't going to be the start of Daniel's happily ever after. It was going to be the stage where I exposed him to everyone who thought he was Mr. Perfect. My plan began to take shape. I thought about the guest list, our parents, our siblings, our friends, Daniel's coworkers, even his boss. All the people who admired him, who thought he was this golden boy. They'd all be there. And so would Rachel, though she didn't know it yet. The image burned into my mind. Standing in my wedding dress, veil trailing behind me, while Daniel's smug little world imploded in front of every single person who mattered. For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt calm. Powerful even. I wasn't just the betrayed fiancé anymore. I was the woman writing the script of his downfall. Daniel thought he was clever living two lives. But he underestimated me. He didn't realize I was 2 steps ahead, playing the long game, setting the stage for the kind of revenge people only whispered about. And as the wedding day drew closer, I smiled wider, laughed louder, and played my role perfectly. Because when the curtain finally rose, the show I had planned would leave Daniel with nothing but ashes. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I became an actress. On the outside, I was the glowing bride-to-be, smiling during dress fittings, laughing with bridesmaids, fussing over centerpieces. Inside, I was ice-cold, calculating every move, rehearsing every step of the revenge that was about to unfold. Daniel didn't suspect a thing. If anything, he seemed more confident, almost smug, as if he believed he'd pulled the wool completely over my eyes. He'd come home late, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine, kiss me on the cheek, and talk about how excited he was for our big day. I'd smile back, kiss him softly, and think, yes, Daniel, it's going to be a day you'll never forget. The first part of my plan was simple: timing. I didn't want to confront him before the wedding. That would give him room to twist the narrative, to spin lies, to convince people I was just a paranoid fiancé who cracked under pressure. No, I wanted the truth to drop like a bomb when it mattered most, when all eyes were on us. The second part was gathering allies. Quietly, carefully, I shared pieces of what I knew with a few trusted friends. Not everything. Just enough to ensure that when the reveal happened, I wouldn't stand alone. My maid of honor, Claire, was the first I told. We were sitting in my kitchen sipping wine, when I slid the folder of PI photos across the table. She flipped through them, her jaw tightening with every page. Emily, she whispered, her eyes wide. He's disgusting. Are you sure you still want to go through with the wedding? Oh, I'm going through with it, I said, my voice steady. But not for the reason Daniel thinks. Claire leaned back, studying me for a moment. Then slowly a grin spread across her face. Oh my God, you're going to torch him, aren't you? I smiled. In front of everyone. Claire became my quiet co-conspirator, helping me refine the plan, reminding me to keep my cool whenever I felt the urge to explode. Together, we brainstormed how to make the reveal as impactful as possible. The third part of my plan was evidence. I wanted it ironclad, undeniable. So I compiled everything into a neat little package. Screenshots, receipts, the PI photos, even copies of his emails with Rachel. I printed them, organized them, and slipped them into envelopes. One envelope for each table at the wedding reception. Yes, you read that right. Every guest was going to see Daniel's betrayal with their own eyes. I pictured it. The envelopes being opened, the gasps, the whispers, the way faces would turn toward him in disgust. It would be theatrical, humiliating, and utterly unforgettable. But I didn't stop there. I also prepared a slideshow. During the reception, instead of a sweet montage of childhood photos and romantic couple shots, I planned to display the photos of Daniel and Rachel, holding hands, kissing, sneaking around. The betrayal projected larger than life for everyone to see. It felt deliciously poetic. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal. Daniel would ramble about honeymoon plans, and I'd nod, secretly knowing there would be no honeymoon. He'd talk about the house we'd buy after the wedding, and I'd smile, knowing the only thing he'd be moving into was a nightmare of his own making. At night, when he was asleep, I'd lie awake rehearsing my speech. What would I say when the moment came? How would I reveal the truth? I didn't want to scream or cry. I wanted to be calm, collected, devastating. Something like, "Daniel, I want to thank you for teaching me a lesson about lies, betrayal, and how much strength I actually have. While you were busy planning a life with someone else, I was busy planning this moment. And now, in front of everyone, I give you the gift of truth." The more I practiced, the steadier I felt. The anger that once threatened to consume me was replaced by resolve. I wasn't just surviving this betrayal. I was reclaiming power. There was one final piece to secure: Rachel. If I wanted maximum impact, she needed to be there. Luckily, Daniel made it easy. A week before the wedding, I accidentally saw a message on his phone from her. "I can't wait to see you after the ceremony. It'll be so hard not to kiss you when she's right there." My stomach turned, but my lips curved into a smile. Perfect. Rachel was planning to attend the wedding as a guest, hidden in plain sight. Daniel, in his arrogance, actually thought he could juggle both of us in the same room. He had no idea I already knew everything. On the surface, the days ticked by in a blur of rehearsals, family dinners, and last-minute details. People kept telling me how radiant I looked, how lucky I was, how excited they were to see me walk down the aisle. I nodded, thanked them, and thought about how shocked their faces would look soon. By the night before the wedding, everything was in place. The venue was ready, the envelopes were stuffed, the slideshow cued. My allies knew their roles, my speech was memorized, and Rachel's presence was confirmed. As I stood in front of the mirror in my bridal suite, veil draped over my head, I felt an odd sense of peace. This wasn't just a wedding anymore, it was an execution. A stage where the truth would finally take center spotlight. And Daniel? Poor clueless Daniel. He thought tomorrow was going to be the happiest day of his life. He had no idea it was about to become the day he'd never lived down. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the kind of day people write poems about. For Daniel, it was supposed to be perfect. For me, it was execution day. I slipped into my gown, let the hairdresser fuss over my curls, and stared at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't a nervous bride. She was a soldier in silk and lace, armed with truth, ready for battle. Guests began arriving at the church, their voices echoing in the high ceilings. Friends, family, co-workers, all of them beaming with excitement. They thought they were here to witness a love story. In reality, they were about to watch a public unmasking. Daniel stood at the altar, looking like the picture-perfect groom. He flashed me that grin, the one that had once made me melt. Now it only made my stomach churn. Smile all you want, I thought. Your world is about to collapse. The ceremony went smoothly. Vows were exchanged, rings were slipped onto fingers, and applause rang out as the priest declared us husband and wife. I kissed him, tasting the bitterness of betrayal even as the crowd cheered. But the real show was waiting at the reception. The hall glittered with fairy lights and floral arrangements, a dream setting for a celebration. People clinked glasses, laughed, and danced. Daniel was in his element, charming guests, raising toasts, reveling in the spotlight. And then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The MC tapped the microphone, calling for everyone's attention. Now, let's enjoy a special presentation prepared by the bride and groom. Daniel shot me a surprised look. I smiled sweetly and gestured for the slideshow to begin. The lights dimmed, the screen flickered on, and instead of childhood photos, the first image appeared. Daniel holding Rachel's hand outside a hotel. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. The next photo flashed. Daniel kissing Rachel in a parking lot. Gasps. Then another. Daniel sneaking into her apartment. The whispers turned into shocked exclamations. Daniel's face went pale. "Emily, what the hell is this?" he hissed. I lifted the microphone, my voice calm and clear. "This, dear guests, is the man I married today. The man who promised me forever while spending our savings on another woman. The man who thought he could lie to me, to all of us without consequence." The slideshow continued, image after damning image. The room was no longer filled with laughter, but with the sound of betrayal crashing down. Guests turned to Daniel, their admiration melting into disgust. Rachel, seated at the back, tried to shrink into her chair, but it was too late. All eyes darted between her and Daniel. A few people gasped her name. I nodded toward the tables. "By the way," I said smoothly, "you'll find envelopes at each of your places. Inside you'll see receipts, emails and screenshots that document exactly how long and how deeply Daniel's betrayal has run." Chairs scraped as people tore open envelopes, flipping through the damning evidence. The sound of paper rustling filled the silence, punctuated by angry whispers and sharp intakes of breath. Daniel looked around wildly, sweat dripping down his temple. "Emily, stop this. We can talk about this later." I cut him off, steady as stone. "Later? You wanted me to stand before God, our families and our friends and vow my life to you, while you were already living a lie. No, Daniel. This is the only time to talk about it. In front of everyone." He reached for me, desperation in his eyes. "Please don't do this." I stepped back, microphone still in hand. "You already did this, Daniel. I'm just making sure the truth gets the wetting it deserves." The crowd erupted, some people shouting, others comforting me. A few storming toward Daniel with anger. His parents looked devastated. Rachel bolted for the door, and Daniel stood frozen, his perfect day crumbling around him. I handed the microphone back to the MC, gathered my gown and walked off the stage. Each step felt lighter, freer. Behind me, Daniel was drowning in the wreckage of his lies, and I didn't look back once. For the first time in months I smiled. Not the fake smile I'd worn for appearances, but a genuine one. Because I had one. Not just revenge but freedom. The reception hall was still buzzing long after I walked out. But the real fallout began in the days that followed. By the next morning my phone was flooded with messages. Friends, relatives, even people I barely knew who had attended. Some were apologizing on Daniel's behalf, others cheering me on for exposing him. But one common theme ran through every message. No one would ever look at Daniel the same way again. His perfect image shattered overnight. At work, the story spread like wildfire. Daniel prided himself on being the charming, dependable guy in the office, but now whispers followed him down every hallway. His colleagues had seen the slideshow, read the receipts. Every deal he tried to close, every handshake he extended, came with a shadow of doubt. Clients pulled away. His boss called him in for a serious conversation. By the end of the month, Daniel was no longer the golden boy of the firm. He was the cautionary tale. Rachel didn't fare much better. Word of her affair had circulated quickly through her own circle, and suddenly she was that woman, the one who wrecked a wedding and humiliated herself in public. Friends dropped her, invitations stopped coming, and her once busy social calendar went silent. She and Daniel had tried to continue seeing each other after the wedding fiasco, but even that crumbled under the weight of public shame and their own bickering. Meanwhile, my life took a very different turn. Instead of hiding in shame, I embraced my freedom. I filed for an annulment immediately. My lawyer, already armed with the evidence I had so carefully gathered, made the process swift and clean. Because Daniel had misused joint funds on Rachel, hotel stays, gifts, even expensive dinners, I had the financial records to prove it. My attorney argued that not only was I entitled to a clean break, but I should also be reimbursed for the money he had stolen from our shared accounts. The court agreed. Within weeks, I walked away not only free of Daniel, but with financial compensation that ensured he didn't leave me burdened by the wreckage. For every dollar he'd wasted on Rachel, he now owed me back. Justice didn't just taste sweet, it tasted expensive. Daniel, on the other hand, was drowning. His once solid finances crumbled. Between legal fees, reimbursements, and the sudden strain of losing business opportunities, he found himself struggling to keep up. He had traded the love and trust of a devoted fiancé for a fleeting affair, and the price tag was steep. The social repercussions were brutal too. Family members who had once adored him kept their distance, embarrassed by his actions. His parents, humiliated by his behavior, could barely look me in the eye when they called to apologize. They tried to smooth things over, but I wasn't interested in reconciliation. I was done. I poured my energy into rebuilding myself. I leaned on Claire, who became my rock, and slowly rediscovered the parts of me that had been buried under Daniel's lies. I took up hobbies I'd abandoned, reconnected with old friends, even traveled for the first time in years. Every step forward was a reminder that I had survived betrayal and come out stronger. And everywhere Daniel went, my revenge followed him like a shadow. He couldn't escape it, the slideshow, the envelopes, the gasps. People whispered about it at parties, coworkers chuckled about it over drinks, and his name became synonymous with humiliation. The wedding that was supposed to be the pinnacle of his perfect image became the tombstone of his reputation. As for me, I didn't just win revenge. I reclaimed my power, my dignity, and my future. Daniel had gambled with my heart and my trust, but I was the one who walked away richer, in every sense of the word. The fallout was complete, the message clear. Betray me once and I'll make sure your lies don't just unravel, they explode. Months passed, and with each one, the chaos faded further into the background. The humiliation Daniel suffered at the wedding had turned into local legend. A story whispered about at dinner parties, retold at office water coolers, and even shared online by a few gleeful guests who couldn't resist spilling the details. Wherever he went, people remembered him not as the charming fiancé, but as the groom who was exposed on his own wedding day. For me, life moved on, but in a way that felt freer, lighter, more authentic. I no longer woke up with that pit in my stomach, wondering if I was being lied to. I didn't have to chase someone's half-hearted affection or beg for honesty. Instead, my days were my own, filled with choices I made for myself rather than compromises forced by betrayal. There were moments, of course, when the memory stung. Betrayal leaves scars. Sometimes I'd find myself replaying scenes in my head. His late-night phone calls, the first damning text message, the look of shock on his face when the slideshow started. But instead of pain, those memories now carried a strange sense of pride. I hadn't crumbled. I hadn't let him walk away with my dignity. I had faced betrayal with strength and turned it into a defining moment of justice. Daniel's life spiraled further. His reputation never recovered, and professionally, doors that had once opened easily for him now slammed shut. Even people who pitted him kept their distance, afraid to be associated with the scandal. Rachel was long gone by then, their short-lived romance collapsing under the weight of guilt and disgrace. They had built their connection on lies, and lies can't hold up forever. I never reached out, never checked in, never stalked their social media. That wasn't my story anymore. My story was one of survival, healing, and eventually joy. One evening, months later, I sat with Claire on her balcony, sipping wine as the sun dipped below the horizon. She nudged me and said, "You know, Em, not everyone would have had the guts to do what you did. Most people would have cried quietly, maybe left, maybe stayed. But you turned it into a statement." I laughed softly, a little embarrassed but mostly grateful. "I didn't just want revenge," I told her. "I wanted the truth out there. I wanted to make sure he couldn't hurt me, or anyone else, with his lies again. And that was the heart of it. Revenge wasn't about cruelty or bitterness. It was about closure. About standing up and saying I deserve better, and I won't let you take that from me." In the end, my wedding day wasn't the beginning of a marriage. It was the end of a lie. It wasn't the storybook ending I'd once dreamed of, but it was real. And it was mine. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't just exposing the cheater. It's walking away with your head high, your future wide open, and the satisfaction of knowing they'll never escape the weight of their own betrayal. And as for me, I didn't just survive Daniel's deceit. I thrived because of it. His betrayal became my liberation. His downfall became my rebirth. And I wouldn't trade that kind of freedom for anything.